I was standing outside a hospital in a red dress, one shoe off, ankle wrapped in a bandage, watching my ex-husband try to bribe my driver with a fistful of cash through a car window. He was so certain I had invented a fiancé to save face that he was willing to pay a stranger to prove it. The driver did not take the money. 30 seconds later, my fiancé walked through that crowd, and Richard Sterling's face went the kind of white that does not come back quickly. He had spent the entire day trying to humiliate me. He had thrown my phone out of a moving car, dragged me onto a street, left me stranded at a courthouse, and stood in a hospital parking lot performing pity for an audience of strangers. And all of it, every single move he made that day, was built on one assumption: that I had no one. He was wrong. And the moment he realized it, in front of Valerie, in front of everyone, was the last time Richard Sterling ever spoke to me. That was how it ended. Here is how it started. I had known for years that my marriage to Richard Sterling was a performance. Not a cruel one. Not at first, just hollow. We had built a life that looked correct from the outside. The right address, the right events, the right photographs. But Richard had never fully arrived in it. Valerie Hayes had been there since before I was. A constant presence at the edge of everything, a name that came up too often, a reason he left too easily. I had invested my own money into his family business when it was underwater. I had managed the relationships that kept his reputation intact. I had done the work of two people for a decade, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, I had also, quietly, fallen out of love with him. So when he sat across from me 8 months ago and said he wanted a divorce, I did not cry. I asked him to pass the salt. He looked almost disappointed that I did not fight harder. I think he had expected a scene. I had already moved on in every way that mattered. I just had not told him yet. What Richard did not know, and what I had never told him, was that the man I was engaged to was someone he had spent years trying to impress. Daniel Holt had been Richard's mentor in the early years of his career, the man whose opinion Richard had shaped his entire professional identity around, the man he had quoted at dinner parties and name-dropped in meetings for a decade. Richard had introduced us at a charity event 3 years ago, proud to show off his wife to the one person whose approval he still wanted. He had no idea what had happened after that event. He had no idea what had been growing, slowly and honestly, in the 2 years since I had already decided to leave. And he had no idea that Daniel Holt, the man he had spent his entire career trying to become, had asked me to marry him 4 months ago in a quiet restaurant with no audience and no performance, and I had said yes before he finished the sentence. The morning of the divorce signing, I got dressed with intention. Full makeup, the red dress, the ruby necklace Daniel had given me 2 months earlier. I was not dressing to provoke Richard. I was dressing for myself, for the version of my life that was starting in about 3 hours. Richard was already in the car when I came down. He looked at me the way people look at something they find offensive, slow and deliberate, making sure I felt the weight of it. Dressed like that? Already looking for your next guy? I touched the necklace and smiled. Yep. And you actually know him. He laughed. It was the laugh of a man who has never seriously considered being wrong. You're delusional. You're 40 and about to be divorced. Who's going to want you? Beg me, and maybe I'll take you back. I looked out the window. The night before, at what my friends had insisted on calling a bachelorette party, 7 men had asked for my number. One had proposed on the spot, which was excessive but flattering. I did not beg. I did not even look at him. Richard did not drive toward the courthouse. He turned the opposite direction, and when I gave him a look, his voice went flat and final. Valerie's coming with us today. Once we're done, I'm marrying her. She's waited 20 years. No more waiting. And there it was, the shape of the last decade, laid out in 2 sentences. Our marriage had been a waiting room. I had been the furniture. When we pulled up to Valerie's building, I stepped out to grab water from a nearby stand. By the time I got back, she was already in the front seat, settled in with the ease of someone who had been practicing for this moment for a long time. She looked back at me with a smile that was almost kind. Scarlett, I always sit up front with Richard. You get it, right? I got in the back. I was getting divorced in an hour. I did not care about the seat. What happened next was the first sign of what the day was actually going to be. Valerie turned around and looked at my wrist. Her eyes settled on the bracelet, a thin gold band with a ruby clasp that Richard had given me 3 years ago for my birthday. "What a gorgeous bracelet," she said, in the tone people use right before they ask for something. Richard did not even turn around. "Scarlett, give Valerie the bracelet." Not a question. An order, delivered to the windshield. I looked at the back of his head for a moment. Daniel had already told me he preferred I not wear jewelry from another man, so I had planned to leave the bracelet behind anyway. I slipped it off and held it out to her. "I have plenty more at home. If you like this one, I'll send you the whole collection." Richard nodded, satisfied, like a man who had just demonstrated something. "As long as you don't make a scene today, I'll make sure no one in our circle finds out about the divorce." I did not respond. He had no idea I was getting remarried. He had no idea about any of it. And I was not going to be the one to tell him in a car. My phone buzzed. Daniel's voice came through warm and certain. "I'm on the plane. Be there soon. I miss you so much." I smiled and typed back. Richard caught it in the rearview mirror. Something shifted in his expression, a tightening around the eyes, the look of a man who does not like information he cannot access. He opened his mouth to ask, and then Valerie screamed. Richard's attention snapped to her instantly. All concern, all gentleness. "What's wrong?" She held up the bracelet, the clasp hanging open. "It broke. I was just holding it and it snapped." She looked genuinely distressed. Richard did not examine the clasp. He did not ask what had happened. He grabbed the broken bracelet, turned around, and threw it at me. Then, before I could process that, he reached back and snatched my phone out of my hand and threw it out the window. I watched a car roll directly over it. The sound was small and final. "What is wrong with you?" My voice came out louder than I intended. He pulled over hard. He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the car, and my heel caught the curb. I went down on my ankle, and the pain was immediate and specific, the kind that tells you something is wrong before you even look. He looked at my foot, already swelling inside my shoe, and dropped my hand. "I only asked you to give her a bracelet, and you broke it on purpose. You're unbelievable." He did not ask if I was hurt. He turned back to the car. I looked up at Valerie through the window. She looked away quickly, something flustered moving across her face before she smoothed it back into stillness. I stood on the sidewalk and did not move for a moment. Not because I was in shock. Because I was doing the math on 10 years, and the math kept coming out the same way. Every time I had needed him, there had been a reason he could not be there. The night I had emergency surgery, he had gone to see Valerie instead. A nurse had sat with me in the recovery room. At our own wedding reception, he had walked out mid-evening because she sent him a text, no explanation, no apology, just gone. Every time I had asked for something real, there had been a reframe, a revision, a version of events in which I was the problem. I had spent a decade being the most reasonable person in every room he put me in. And I was standing on a sidewalk in a red dress with a broken phone and a swollen ankle, and he was already gone. I was done being reasonable. I started walking. By the time I reached the courthouse, my ankle had swollen enough that I had to stop outside and lean against the wall just to breathe through the pain. I was standing there, eyes closed, when I heard footsteps behind me, fast and deliberate, and then someone lifted me from behind. Richard. He carried me up the steps without a word, jaw set, eyes forward, the way someone completes an obligation. He set me down the moment we were inside and stepped back immediately, like proximity to me was something to be managed. When we passed Valerie waiting near the entrance, I caught her expression before she rearranged it. It was not warmth. It was the look of someone doing arithmetic. A courthouse staff member approached us with a clipboard and a professional smile. "Are you two here for a marriage license?" Richard's face darkened. He stepped away from me. "No." "Divorce." The paperwork moved quickly. I sat near the window afterward with my divorce papers, watching the door, waiting. My phone was gone. I had no way to reach Daniel, no way to tell him I was hurt or where I was. Valerie appeared beside me, Richard on her arm, her new marriage certificate already in her other hand, held at an angle that made it visible. "Scarlett, your foot looks terrible. We can take you to the hospital if your fiancé isn't coming." She said fiancé the way people say imaginary friend, with just enough lightness to make the doubt plausible. I touched at my lipstick. No thank you. He'll be here. She tilted her head. Of course. Richard, let's wait with her a little while, just to make sure she's okay. She pulled him into the chairs beside me, and I understood exactly what she was doing. She wanted a front row seat for when no one showed up. She wanted to be the one offering the ride home. It got dark. Daniel still had not come. I reached for my phone out of habit, then remembered. I stood up to leave, and Valerie was immediately on her feet, certificate in hand, smiling. Scarlett, where is he? You don't have to pretend with us. Honestly, where would you even find a fiancé? I checked my pockets. No cash, no phone, no way to get anywhere on my own. So when she offered the hospital ride, I said yes. Outside, I held the railing going down the steps, moving carefully. Valerie rushed over. Let me help you. I was about to tell her I was fine when she screamed, her foot slipping on the edge of the step, and she fell backward into Richard's arms. She pressed her face against his chest, tears forming with impressive speed. Scarlett, I just wanted to help. Why did you push me? Richard's expression hardened. He grabbed my wrist, yanking me down the remaining steps. You're unbelievable, Scarlett. Even now. He saw my ankle. Something moved across his face, a flicker of something that might have been hesitation, and he started to say something, but Valerie said his name, quietly, just once, and he turned away. He helped her into the car. The door closed. They drove off. I stood on the sidewalk watching their taillights disappear. I limped to the nearest police station and asked an officer to help me get to a hospital. He did, without making me feel small for asking. My assistant met me in the emergency room with a new phone and a charger. The second my SIM card was in, it rang. Daniel's voice came through before I finished saying hello. Scarlett, finally. I have been calling for hours. What happened? I looked at my bandaged foot propped on the exam table. Nothing major. Twisted my ankle. The pause on his end was short and loaded. I'm coming right now. My flight turned back because of weather. I landed an hour ago, and I have been trying to reach you since. I was terrified. I told him to slow down. I told him I was fine. I told him where I was and that I would explain everything when I saw him. After I hung up, I opened Instagram and saw that Richard, who had not posted anything in 3 years, had uploaded a photo. Courthouse steps. White dress. Both of them smiling. I left one comment. Congratulations. Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness. He called me 30 seconds later. I declined and blocked his number. Whatever he wanted to say, I did not need to hear it. I was walking out of the exam room when I nearly walked into them. Richard and Valerie coming out of the room next door. Valerie had her wrist in a soft brace. Richard looked at me, then at the empty hallway behind me, and the pity on his face was so practiced it looked almost genuine. By yourself? I kept walking toward the exit. They followed. Richard's voice came from behind me, measured and calm, the tone he used when he wanted to sound like the only adult in the room. Scarlett, you don't need to keep this up. Not many people have what Valerie and I have. She waited 20 years. You don't need to invent someone to compete with that. Valerie added, softer, almost gentle. We won't laugh. It's okay to admit it. I almost did laugh. I had been dragged out of a car, left on a sidewalk, accused of pushing a woman I had not touched, publicly pitted in a courthouse, and now they were offering me permission to confess. I had spent the entire day absorbing the cost of Richard's certainty. I was done. Very well, I said. Since you both want to know so badly, I'll introduce you a little early. You already know him. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and kept moving. My ride is here. Outside, a car pulled up to the curb. Richard stepped forward without hesitating, pulled out a thick fold of cash, and pushed it through the window. Cancel the ride. She doesn't need you. He turned back to me with a smile that had no warmth behind it at all. Valerie opened the back door with enthusiasm, performing generosity for an audience that was mostly just me. Scarlett, just admit it. Even if you made someone up on a whim, it's fine. We really won't laugh. I got in the back seat. Richard drove. Valerie sat up front, quiet now, the performance of sympathy replaced by something more careful and watchful. I was on my phone replying to messages, and I was smiling because the messages were good and because I knew what was coming and they did not. Richard watched me in the rearview mirror with increasing irritation. After a few minutes, he could not hold it. "What? Are you having your friends text you to fake it?" I sent one last reply and locked the screen. "That won't be necessary." He reached back for my phone. I moved my hand. "Richard Sterling, you do not have the right to check my phone anymore."
His jaw tightened.
He looked away.
"Fine.
Let's see how long you keep this up." We arrived at the location I had given him. I got out and stood near the entrance, my weight on my good foot. Richard and Valerie stood off to the side, arms linked, watching with the patience of people who are certain they are about to be proven right. Valerie checked her watch. "Scarlett, it's cold. This is enough. Let us take you home." She did not finish the sentence. Daniel came through the crowd. I saw him before Richard did, before Valerie did, before anyone else had processed what was happening. He walked straight to me, and the crowd shifted around him the way crowds shift around people who know exactly where they're going. He pulled me close and kissed me, and for a moment the parking lot was very quiet. Then I looked at Richard. His face was white, not pale.
White.
The kind of white that happens when the story you have been telling yourself for years stops making sense all at once. He was looking at the man he had spent his entire career trying to become. The man he had quoted at dinner parties. The man whose approval he had chased for a decade. That man was standing in a hospital parking lot with his arms around his ex-wife, and the expression on his face made it clear that he had chosen her, not as a consolation, not as a rebound, but as the point of the whole thing. Valerie said his name first. She said it the way you say a name when you cannot believe what you are seeing, when the information in front of you refuses to connect to anything that makes sense. Her voice broke on the second syllable. Not dramatically. Just the sound of a wall taking one crack too many. Richard crossed the distance in 4 steps and grabbed my arm. "Scarlett, you cannot be with him." Valerie moved forward and grabbed Daniel's arm, her voice unraveling. "How can you be with her? After everything?" Daniel looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at Richard's hand on mine.
He looked at me.
I nodded once. He gently removed Valerie's hand. Then he looked at Richard, and his voice was level and quiet and left no room for negotiation. "Let go of her." Richard did not let go. "You knew her when she was married to me. You knew exactly what you were doing." Daniel did not raise his voice. "She came to me after she had already decided to leave. I did not pursue a married woman. And right now, you're holding her arm when she has a documented ankle injury and has been asking you, through every action she has taken today, to leave her alone. So, I am going to ask you one more time. Let go of her." Richard let go. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had heard all day. Richard turned to me one last time. The performance was gone. His voice was quieter, stripped of everything he had been performing all day. "I didn't think you'd actually move on." I looked at him for a moment. "I know," I said. "That was always the problem." I took Daniel's arm, and we walked away, and I did not look back, not because I was being dramatic, but because there was genuinely nothing back there worth seeing. The weeks after were quieter than I expected. There was no public collapse, no legal battle, no moment where Richard stood in a room and had everything taken from him at once. What happened was smaller and more permanent than that. Valerie told the story of that day to anyone who would listen, always positioning herself as the patient one, the devoted one, the woman who had finally gotten what she deserved. But the details kept shifting. The courthouse staff remembered things. The hospital staff remembered things. Daniel had a clear and specific account of what he had witnessed, and he was not a man people found easy to dismiss. The version of Richard that Valerie kept promoting did not survive contact with the actual sequence of events. He had thrown a phone out of a car window. He had left an injured woman on a sidewalk. He had tried to bribe a driver in a hospital parking lot in front of witnesses. He had grabbed his ex-wife's arm in public while she was on crutches. None of that was the behavior of a man who had simply moved on. It was the behavior of a man who needed to win so badly that he had stopped noticing what he was doing to get there. There was one more thing. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from Richard's business attorney. The investment I had made in the Sterling family business a decade ago, the one Richard had reframed as a manipulation, had been documented with more precision than anyone had apparently remembered. My attorney reviewed the original agreements. The terms were clear. I was owed a return that Richard had quietly assumed I would never pursue because he had assumed I would be too embarrassed, too eager to disappear, too grateful for a clean exit to look closely at the paperwork. He had assumed wrong. The settlement was handled privately, without drama, without a courtroom. Richard paid what was owed. He did not contest it. I think by that point he understood that the version of me he had constructed in his head had never been accurate. It had just been convenient. I did not need him to lose everything. I had never wanted that. What I had wanted, for longer than I could clearly remember, was to stop being the person who absorbed the cost of his certainty. To stop being the one who stayed quiet while he rewrote the facts. To stop being the furniture in a life that was never really mine. I had that now. Called me until he ran out of ways to reach me because he was scared I was hurt. I had a settlement that reflected what I had actually contributed. I had a door that was closed and locked and had no handle on his side. Some people spend years engineering a perfect revenge. I spent one very long, very painful day just trying to get through it with my dignity intact. By the end, I had something better than revenge. I had proof, clear and permanent, that I had never needed his permission to be fine.